What's up, everybody? Jackson here today with my little brother Chubbz.
Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be doing a cooperative review of Remnant from the Ashes, which is a Dark Tower Souls inspired third person shooter with a lot of really awesome things going on with it and a whole lot of problems as well. I'd say I felt like it was worth the play. But that's because I didn't run into the problem our brother had where his power went out and he lost power to his PC and he lost his entire save file of 38 plus hours of gameplay going through all three of our games all the way up to world. I think we were in world 3, the jungle planet, but we were pretty far along. Also, this is going to have a lot of spoilers, so just keep that in mind. This is a spoiler filled review. I feel like the game's been out long enough, it doesn't fucking matter, but
Exactly.
disclaimer there for all the anal ones. And I appreciate it because I'm the same way. I
Right.
like to hear it if it's something that, is gonna fucking ruin an experience for me. So I understand some people just, I just don't fucking tell me spoilers. I just, you don't fucking tell me spoilers. You spoiled the whole experience with that one thing, and I'll never get it back, and my life is ruined, and I can't even bear to go on anymore.
So yeah, spoilers.
Fucking spoilers ahead, ahoy. So
Spoiling the shit.
yes, he had a problem. That if you have that rare instance where your PC loses power and it's shut off in the middle of your playthrough, you will lose progress. There's a Reddit thread about this. It's a well-known issue that is yet to be patched out of the fucking game, that is for sale and put forth as a finished product.
Yeah.
And in no way, shape, or form should your finished game have any instance where someone, and especially in a game like this, there should never be any goddamn instance where that fucking player can lose progress up until the point where they can't recover it. It's gone.
Profile corrupted.
Profile corrupted. Start new character. That's all you can do. There's a fix that this one user put forth that said it works, but you lose campaign progress. Still fucking unacceptable.
Yeah.
Unfucking accept. Can you imagine you're
which-
playing Dark Souls, bro, and
Yeah.
you're like, you've fucking been hitting away at it on your first playthrough, and you're like over 40 hours in, and your power in your neighborhood goes out, and you just lost your character.
Yeah, entire playthrough.
Unfucking acceptable. Unfucking
Just gone.
acceptable.
Yeah.
So that needs to be fixed.
Oh yeah.
And this is
even that Reddit,
Gunfire and developed by a Perfect World. This isn't a small publisher. This is a publisher that has the money and the means, and this is a company that should definitely fucking fix this.
Yes.
Because like I said before, there's a lot of really good things, but the most of the negative things that come into play don't really affect me telling someone to get this. This does.
Yes.
This does. I have to tell them, well, if you have a random act of God or fucking some random hardware issue or something occurs where your PC loses power, you're going to lose all of your progress.
Yep.
You may be 38, 40 hours in, you're going to lose it all.
Gone.
That's hard to fucking recommend a game that's an
That
instance
can happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really fucking
And
hard.
another thing that I'd like to point out real quick is that fix that we found on Reddit that said go into your save files and do this weird little copy paste thing and remove these things. It didn't work. So
Yeah,
like
he couldn't get it back at all.
even if you lose your campaign progress, the fix of having your character's progress still maintain, like your traits, your build, your progression, your weapons, all of this stuff is what he was trying to save, not able to save it.
Because the way this game works is very cool. I like the way the game works with the upgrades and the boss kills and the variations on. So for instance, each playthrough, and this was marketed, this was a big thing, people probably already know this, but your map changes. And it's not exactly I'm not sure if the map changes exactly, because in some places it was exactly the same, but the offshoots had different things in them.
Right.
So I'm not sure exactly how much the palette of the map changes, and how much it's just the same, and then the exits lead to randomized points, randomized bosses.
Right.
But it's impossible on one playthrough by oneself if you're not having, like we were playing it in 3 games, so we saw a lot of the variations through our one playthrough that you could see.
Right.
Even though Chris was the one who was going to do the Undying King's ending
storyline.
Yes,
yeah,
which is another very cool thing. They have RPG choices in the game that will affect the playthrough, that will be either you're working with someone or you're killing that someone.
Right.
And we opted to kill him in our games because Chris had opted to work with him. And in your game, after we had gone and initially met him, it was very cool the way that played out with the Undying King, where when we initially found him in Chris's game, we hadn't ran into that one NPC who had fed us dialogue telling us that he's like killing off a race of people in order to create himself, like, that's why he's called the Undying King. He's basically vampiring the people of the planet,
draining them,
and if not the planet itself.
Yeah.
Who knows if that's not what has drained the planet's life force? Like why it's a desolate wasteland.
We know that he's like a tyrant. You know what I mean? And so because he is a tyrant and more on like the evil, chaotic side of things, what would he do with the Guardian's heart that he's asking?
Well, also
for,
he has a very
like
religious,
what would he do with that?
There's a religious there's a religious like following for him. He's like a god figure. It very much in my mind mimics Stargate and Ra.
Yeah.
The alien being that was like Ra, and he took humans to that planet to basically be his slaves. And when Kurt Russell and everyone discover him, David Spader, Robert California, when they find him all those years later, they're still like that religious cult like people and slaves of ancient Egypt. Right. And so like that's where I kind of saw this, where he has like that pyramid. There's a lot of symbolism there where I feel like he's put himself up not just as an emperor, but as a god emperor.
Right.
Like, I'm a god.
Yes. Very tyrannical.
That's one place where I would have to salute the game the most, is like world building through visuals. This game is fucking amazing.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of really cool visuals and variations on that. Like each planet, from when you start out the game on Earth, I think. I don't fucking know. The beginning of the game is so goddamn convoluted and out there. We'll be getting to that. That's the story section, which we'll be covering.
We will be covering that soon.
Which I haven't experienced the fucking story this hilarious and just nonsensical in a very long time. And you're gonna have to help me, because there's a lot of gaps.
And I will compare it to something. And it's a fair comparison. But
anyway, so you start out on Earth, and on Earth everything looks vastly different compared to the next planet, which I'm unsure of the actual name of it.
I think that's Desert World, Rom.
It's Rom, something like that. It is the desert
I'm
world.
unsure of the swamp
it looks to be what happened there was, and that's where the irradiated enemies are. Where radiation, there's different weaknesses and buffs that you can use to attack enemies. I guess not buffs, but weaknesses. So there's for instance, it's like bleeding or poison or toxic in Dark Souls, right? It's exactly like that. There's a bar that slowly fills up, and then eventually you're infected, you're on fire, and each one of those has a corresponding ailment cure that will get rid of it.
And it is serious negative side effect.
Yes.
Which I would compare the toxic to that's why I compared it to kind of like to Let It Die, because when you got sick and died, you would like cough and it would like kind of fuck up your movement.
And you couldn't move. That's exactly what infected was like.
Right. The root rot.
Yeah, I think it was just infected. Was it root rot? I don't know what it was called. It said infected on your.
Sickness, something, some
It
sort
said
of
infected.
sickness, yeah.
It's probably root rot.
But then there's also the radiation, like you were bringing up, which you first are introduced on ROM, which kills your stamina meter by 50%.
Yeah, they each do a little something different.
Yeah.
And so, like, my feeling with the desert planet was that it had fallen into nuclear war and then had reached this like post-apocalyptic state where the undying king reigns because he's the only one with the knowledge to handle these machines, because all the dudes in the villages and shit, they are the hollowed out cities,
Right.
they all look really tribal.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like they look like they're just like cavemen almost.
And they're the only ones who actually look humanoid, like earthling humanoid. Like the Undying King looks like an alien straight out of science
there's another.
fiction.
They mentioned like 2 or 3 different races that are on the planet, and one of them are just straight up being used as fuel for the dying king's life force, the undying king's life force. But we found that out later, and that was a very cool way. But we might as well just shift gears here. But I really briefly want to touch back onto the opening problem, and the reason it makes it hard to recommend this game is there were hard crashes. We experienced a slew of hard crashes. And the game is very well optimized when it's running, like when it works.
Right.
I only saw a few instances of enemy AI pathing fucking up, them getting stuck in walls, things like that. There was the one enemy type in the final area, the forest planet, where they were like, when I had my critical ability. So the way that the ability system work is you have weapons that some of them have unequipable mods that are a power just unto themselves, like boss weapons have certain slotted powers that you can't unequip.
Yeah, right.
But other guns in the game, you unequip one and you can equip a new power, and you can equip a new power. And the 3 starting powers, I'm not sure what yours was, but I know that mine was a hill. Chris's, the class he picked, was a critical hunter's eye, which basically highlights enemies behind walls and gives you a damage bonus to those enemies that are highlighted, and it works for the whole party. And I started my character as the spellcaster class, and very early on invested into the spirit trait point, which is very cool how the upgrading system works in the passive level up system there. But I was using that for the majority of the playthrough, and I didn't experience any problems with that weapon mod until that last little bit of area. Those one enemy types were just like, it looked like they were moving, but their character model was staying where they were.
Right.
And I don't know if that was happening regardless of my ability being active or not.
Right.
But I noticed it when my ability was active on that enemy.
When you were looking at the outline of the enemy through the environment.
So there was a lot of things like that where it was a handful of times where I noticed things happening in that regard, and some of them could be chalked up to lag. However, in the areas where we were experiencing the most, I would say it was the 3rd planet, the planet with the hive mind that had kind of taken over all the settlers and stuff, you come to find out.
Right.
Which you never really find out what they were. Were they human?
You could join them.
Yeah, you could join the queen. I think that was an
option. Yeah, you could join up with them.
And who knows what that does.
Right.
But the point I'm saying is we don't know who the settlers were who did join up with her.
At all.
We don't know what race they were. There was very little in that regard. But there were notes in cabins that we could read. And the story in this game is so fucking... It fucks itself up all over the place. We'll be getting into that. But briefly, just wanted to talk about performance-wise... that it looked great. Load times didn't overstay their welcome, nor were they incredibly short. They were decent load times for what the world was.
Right.
And only in a few areas did we experience problems. However, I experienced several hard crashes throughout our playthrough. You did. Chris did. Hard crashes that did not consist of Chris's one problem where his power went out and he had to he
Get
lost
his
his whole
corrupted
progress.
profile, yeah.
But we were all the whole time experiencing hard crashes with the game.
In the
Kicked out
middle
Unreal,
of boss fights. Yeah.
Unreal error report that you could, send. And and when it was happening during boss fights, if we were in the person's game who experienced the hard crash, we all got booted to menu.
Yep.
And we had to wait for them to get back in. So these were, although this happened probably only a dozen times total across all boards, one of them resulted in Chris losing his entire fucking save game.
Yep.
And several of them were happening on what I believed to be the most challenging bosses in the game. And they were the bosses in that third world. And especially the Zivu or whatever that tentacled butterfly. It was like the Moonlight Butterfly. If the Moonlight Butterfly
The
had
battle on the bridge.
Yeah, if you was on
Ixalis?
track, Exilis,
Ixalis?
something
Yeah,
like that.
something like that, yeah.
Exilius.
Yeah.
The third, or
It was like the third and then the fourth. The
yeah,
fourth and the
Then
fifth.
there's two, and you're like, Jesus, what the fuck? But we'll be getting there. But I just feel like at those times, like with all those things, like to be a finished game that's relying heavily on multiplayer because of the variations in worlds, which is a huge increase in quality over a Dark Souls, where it's the same things, the same item placements, the same gear, the same bosses in everyone's game, and you have to do it 3 times.
And you
in
have to. Like, after
yeah.
you beat a boss in Dark Souls, if you
Yeah,
have
you
something
have
in
to
you,
go
you're
back.
you have to go back. In this, it's like, no, we can keep going forward.
Yeah, we can stay
At
in one
our
person's
leisure.
game. Yeah, we can
We can
stay in
do-
one person's game and push their game to the very end if we wanted to. Salt and Sanctuary is the same way.
Right.
There's several games that do that with the Dark Souls like style.
Right.
Which I prefer that being upgraded. Like, that's the thing. If you are gonna ape things from Dark Souls, at least accept where its faults are. And if you're making a game driven towards a cooperative campaign experience, I appreciate Gunfire's take on this being, okay, well, let's have random items, let's have random, you know what I mean, and random bosses, so it can be different bosses in each of our games. And then on top of that, let's not have it be like they have to use an item in order to join co-op, and then once they kill a boss, they have to get out and then do it all again, reusing the same item at the beginning with where their friend was. You know what I mean? Like the way Dark Souls does.
Right.
Acknowledge that that's probably not even really needed, and just let them stay in the one game and push to the very end if they're capable and willing.
Yeah.
If they don't, feel the need to drop back, but it's beneficial to you to stop and go back, because there is random item placements. There's random weapons to be found.
Optional areas.
Random rings to be found, random necklaces to be found, random armor sets to be found, hidden in different areas across the game. And that's why I appreciate that aspect a lot of it. Another thing I really appreciated was the way the leveling system worked, where passively you gained experience from killing enemies, killing bosses, and that's like kind of your the meat and potatoes of the progression, right? That's your baseline. And they add an intricacy there where, since I started as the spellcaster version of in this game, I think it's the cultist, but since I started as that, I had access to the energy trait card right away. Whereas you guys, since you started as the brawler, the melee class,
I started with the warrior, which increased my melee damage.
and I didn't get that trait point till much later, after achieving a certain amount of kills on enemies with my melee weapon.
Right, there's challenges which unlock brand
And
new traits.
I like that, because that's very much in the spirit of a Dark Souls, where it doesn't matter if you start as a cleric, you can end your playthrough as a pyromancer. It doesn't matter if you start your playthrough as a pyromancer, you can end your playthrough as a mage. You can, if you understand what you need to be working towards and what you need to be building towards, you will end up getting there. And I like that in this, it's passive challenges. So, for instance, for you to get the spirit perk that I started with, or trait that I started with, you had to cast a certain amount of mod powers.
No, actually, it had to be a specific dungeon random roll, and I had to get the reward and clear it.
Really?
So that's what I got for that. But Chris's one, the Headhunter, the critical one, that was the same way. After a certain amount of critical damage kills, you got
dealt
that
too.
one.
Yeah, I ended up unlocking that one too.
But,
and that was the passive that the hunter started with.
Yeah.
So I liked that about it very much, that there was kind of you would lose time if you wanted to change course, but you were free to change course.
Yeah.
I liked that I started as the cultist, so I started with the hill, and Chris started as the hunter, and he started with the through walls you could see enemies. I forget right now what the exact hunter's eye or something like
Right.
that. But he started with that mod power. I liked that they gave us the ability to buy both of those powers from a merchant.
Right.
So that I could have the crit eye hill, and Chris could switch up to the hill if he wanted. And you the same way, you know what I mean? And your ability that you started with was the fire that imbued your gunshots with fire.
Yeah.
Which we all picked up very early on, because that was really good on certain enemies.
Really good damage. You set them on fire.
Yeah, it did that damage over time effect, which not only in that one boss, that the first wall, which we'll move on to that in a minute. I really like the bosses in this game.
Yeah.
That's probably, in my opinion, where the game is the strongest. And I don't even mean in like presentation. I don't even mean in anything beyond design, because they're designed to be chaotic and overwhelming, but then the moment they click in your head, they become completely manageable.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where it's borderline unfair for a minute. In your mind, you feel like this is borderline unfair. We're getting nowhere. This is horse shit. I feel like this fight is rigged. And then you walk out in the next attempt and you fucking just boom, 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 handle it without even a problem. And it all just clicks into your brain. And we had several points through the game, our playthrough, where that happened with the bosses.
Oh, yeah.
But back to the progression system. On top of that, as you do kill these bosses, once you kill the boss, you unlock access to either a boss weapon or a boss weapon mod. And if it's a boss weapon, it's going to come equipped with a weapon mod.
Right.
Aside from the melee weapons. But the melee weapons oftentimes do something cool. Like the one off of the bridge boss gave me... whenever I hit anyone with a melee attack, it gave me passive mod regeneration.
The Spirit Engine Axe or
Yeah,
whatever.
which ultimately allowed me to use my mods more, which is what I was building towards the whole game, was just being able to use weapon mods whenever I could, as much as possible.
Right.
And, you know, it ended up that there were weapon mods that I got off of bosses that allowed me to summon minions. And if I wanted, I could have two little seedling guys with the axes running around chopping enemies, and also two flying skulls flying around shooting enemies with irradiation damage. So it was like that sort of stuff there. So like the progression through, instead of killing a boss and it's like you get a boss soul and you got to go do something weird with it, they simplified that down to you take it to the one merchant who's going to give you one thing for it. But they added to that the variations on the kills. So for instance, with the tree boss, we looked up a thing and it said that if you chop its legs off, and that's how we found out about that, was looking, browsing the Steam store page. You had seen that there were alternate kills to bosses.
Yeah.
And I was like, just curious, what do you get for breaking this one's off? And you were like, a big hammer. And I was like, let's do it, because you're melee, and that'll probably be better ultimately than the mod. And it
really was.
Yeah.
On the desert planet, I was able to two-hit every enemy.
Yeah, with your melee weapon.
Yep,
you were
no
stomping
issues.
stuff. And that was a very good place to go melee.
Mm-hmm.
The downside to that melee build was that several bosses were hard to use.
After the third area.
Yeah.
After the third area is when I started to feel... It was, alright, it wasn't after the third area, it was halfway through. Because there were a lot of bosses in the third area where I felt I could get up close and hit them with my melee.
A little bit.
Which, there's amulets to buff your melee.
There's a whole set of gear.
A whole set of arsenal. Like, I had a ring
Rings,
that if I got a
necklaces.
crit, it would bleed them, and I was using a fire sword, so not only would it set them on fire, but it would bleed them too.
Yeah. So
You
you were
know,
going on.
I was going a lot of different melee variations there towards the end, but as soon as about halfway through the planet, when we got to that Ixalis boss fight in specifically, it felt like from that point on, use nothing but ranged. And not just ranged, because I was using shotguns and shit, because the starter shotgun it started me with was actually way more powerful than the one I could buy from the merchant.
Yeah.
So I was just using that my entire playthrough. But as soon as we got to that point, I realized that the shotgun and being up close in any form is not a viable plan right now. So I have to invest all of my upgrade materials into a different weapon.
And that was why that would be one of my critiques about several games, Borderlands among them.
Right.
Is there's games that have, and we were playing this through on the hard setting, so it was much harder than a normal playthrough would be.
Right.
If you were just starting the game and playing through on normal. So with that in mind, we were really looking to be like what we thought the game was telling us, because the game's telling us that like the cultist is going to be a healer class, the brawler is going to be a melee, like up close and personal. In our eyes, when we see that, we read, oh, Hills tank, you know what I mean? So like, and it didn't really feel like in that aspect it worked out so much as it was really just like an action third person shooter with Souls elements in the form of a stamina bar that controlled how much you could roll, how much you could sprint. And with that in mind, just really quick, I got to throw this out as a complaint. Not having the option to remap buttons is an awful idea. For instance, our brother Crumb, who played this with us, he wanted to remap his run from his move stick, because if you use the move stick to click, it ends up breaking your fucking paddle. I have 2 paddles, and one of them is specifically not to be used in any game where I have to sprint. Because if I have to use the button to sprint, I'm going to use the paddle that's already fucked up and has drift and has problems with the stick. Because that's inevitably going to happen to any paddle that has that. And so Chris ended up playing this with his mouse and keyboard. His preferred way to play this third-person action shooter would have been with a controller.
Right.
He likes to use a controller as much as possible. He's like me in that regard, like you in that regard.
Right.
I preferred the use of a paddle if it feels right. If it's something that I can feel like I can play this just as well with a paddle as I could a keyboard, I'm going to use a paddle.
Right.
And I would have appreciated, in one regard, that Dark Souls still in my mind stands above and beyond other games, is having the shift put on the circle key, on the B button. Because if it's on that button, sure, you have to end up with a kind of crab claw grip if you're going to sprint and also hold the camera. I personally have never used the crab grip ever while playing Dark Souls, while playing Monster Hunter, and I have no problem sprinting and fucking using my camera. Right. I'm able to find time to use my camera, to fix it where I need it, and then sprint away and be able to handle that no problem. I've never had an issue with that. It's never been a thing where I'm like, that just fucked me up having that there. But if I had had in each of those games, the Dark Souls games, Bloodborne, all those games, if it had been that you had to push the stick in, well, I probably would have wore out my paddles much faster.
Oh, yeah.
And having the option where if you're going to have dodge be mapped to A, then why not just have holding down A be the sprint?
Exactly.
And if not, at least have the option for the player to map the controls so that is the case.
Yes.
And there was no option to remap controls in this, and that was a problem for me, because I personally don't like pushing in my stick to run. I will if I have to, but I don't like to.
Yeah.
Because it does fuck up your paddles. It'll fuck up your drift on your joystick. It'll fuck up movement in games. Certain games will have issues with movement once you've wore out that left stick.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was one aspect of it I wanted to bring up, because I felt like Dark Souls handled it perfectly by having it hold in the dodge button to run.
Right.
And integrated within the system, it worked fine. And I felt like this, when you're in the nitty gritty of combat, not when you're just sprinting to move to a new area or sprinting through an area to get back to a separate thing, you know what I mean, where you've already cleared it and you're just sprinting through now. I felt in the context of the gameplay, having that button mapping be hold A to run, tap A to dodge would have worked. Like in the aspect of the way combat works in this, where it is a third person shooter, where there is melee mixed in. You have melee enemies, you have all these things. And there is
no lock on.
And at certain points you have to run. But mostly what this gameplay boiled down to for me, the way I played it, was post up, shoot at anything that comes at you. If it's overwhelming numbers, turn and run, find a safe place to post up and shoot anything that comes at you.
Yeah.
That's the way I played this game, and it worked out pretty great.
Oh, yeah.
We were able to make it through the whole thing with, like I said, we played it on hard, so there were difficulty checks.
And it should be brought up that the reason why we put it on hard was because we were playing through the tutorial on normal. There is no easy difficulty, so we figured normal was easy. And when we were playing through the tutorial, it was so fucking easy. And when we actually got into a group together up to the first boss,
it was boring.
It was boring. We were falling asleep.
Easy.
To be fair, we had been up all night downloading it, so when we started playing, it was like 3 a.m, so it was late. But still, like, it was so easy, it was putting us to sleep. And that's why the next day, before we started again, we re-rolled it on hard, and immediately the bosses felt really difficult.
And it felt, and here's the thing about, so the first boss we came up against that really checked us was the Shroud. And that was the footage we used in our It video when we reviewed it too. And our feeling with that boss, my personal feeling was, I had that level of frustration from like, fuck, wiped, fuck, wiped, fuck, wiped. But I never felt like any of those wipes weren't our fault.
Right.
Like, I never felt like when I went down, it wasn't my fault. Like, every time I went down, I was like, fuck, I missed that dodge. Fuck, he telegraphed that attack. I should have known. You know what I mean? And it's like, we even like got killed at the very end of the boss. When we finally actually killed him.
Yeah.
He ended up killing us because he did that volley one more time somehow. We were just like, he's dead, his life bar's gone. And I dropped my paddle on my lap and like, yes! Had my arms in the air, and then boom, I'm dead. And I'm like, oh, what? What? And I was like, I hope it's like Dark Souls in that aspect. I hope we don't have to kill him again. And we walked in, we didn't have to kill him again.
Luckily.
Like, thank God. Yes. Thank God. I did not want to have to kill that guy again. But each time in that boss, that was the first boss I feel like that really tested us. We had some trouble with the tree. Maybe, a half dozen deaths on the tree. When Nito joined us, for the few times he joined us when Chris couldn't play with us, Nito helped us push through like the enemy that split, the boss that split. Yeah, that boss was really hard. That was another very hard boss that Nito had never come up against either. So he had to learn the fight, you know what I mean, with us, because he had never done it. Even though he had logged a lot of hours into the game, and that's impressive. Mm-hmm. That's impressive that someone who's been through the game and New Game Plus can end up seeing a character on a third playthrough, or a boss on a third playthrough that they hadn't seen.
Right.
That's pretty damn impressive as far as replayability and variety, right? Unfortunately, the replayability falls apart once you start to get into the story aspect of the game.
Yes.
But I did enjoy the progression of the game. I enjoyed the alternate way to kill bosses in order to get different rewards for the same bosses. I enjoyed the bosses were random, like in each of your games, you could have a different boss at this point in the game than your friend who has an entirely different boss. And then that boss may have a separate way to kill it that leads to an alternate reward. And then that boss, so you're going to get the boss 3 times. In some cases, you're going to have to kill a boss 2 times to get all the rewards, you know? So you're going to have to hope that the boss comes again, and if it does, you remember, you say, oh, okay. That leaves an astounding amount of replayability there.
Right.
with that aspect alone. It randomizing, mixing things up, bosses, mixing up the challenge rooms. There's different little like side quests where it's like fight for the survivors and save these people, and if you save them then you're rewarded. There's NPCs you can come across who are in the midst of dying, and they give you a key and say, hey, at the end of this dungeon is my stash.
Yeah, my hidden stash.
You can go to my stash and have whatever you want, and go for it. So all of that really was awesome, but the story.
Let's get into the story now.
The fucking story in this game makes no sense.
It is so dumb.
So, here we go. Chubbz, tell the people about the intro, because still after watching it 3 times before we start recording this, it still makes my brain hurt and I can't comprehend. I can't. Yeah. Here's the problem I
watched it with you and I still don't understand what the lady says, but I understand. I can like give a summarize of it. I'm not gonna go word for word.
Yeah.
But I watched it a lot.
But you know why it's fucking? You know what it is, bro? It's the clash of like. You've got all these different things that happen in the game, and in your brain you're trying to work them all to coincide with the beginning of the game, and none of it fucking makes sense.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, the beginning doesn't make sense. That's why you're having trouble remembering it. That's why I'm having trouble remembering it, because it doesn't align with the rest of what I do remember of the story.
Well, here's the thing with it, is it might make sense, but regardless, the intro does nothing. As far as like a Souls-like game, in Dark Souls, the intro tells you a little bit about the world. And it is interesting, and it is important characters, and it is important events. In this, the events are, as played out... So humanity's been hunted by something for years, for generations.
For generations.
And they come from this very specific island off the coast of whoever the fuck knows, right? Okay? So, now, you are sent by humanity because a long time ago, monsters were hunting humanity down, and they sent a human hero to the island, and then they bring in a weird little line about a dragon, so now there's a fucking dragon involved. And the hero is able to slay the dragon, but the hero never returned from the island. So the dragon's dead, the hero's dead, and from the ashes of this event is this new threat. And you're a new hero sent to the same island.
It's a woman narrating this, and it's showing your character pull a boat and like set sail, and you look determined, like you have a purpose, and then you hit a storm, and then
you get lost at sea,
washed aboard this island, and you look behind you, and there's the tower that seems to be very important. It's mentioned in the beginning. It's like
this is this area. This is where you're supposed to go.
It's the dark fucking tower, Roland. Because you gotta get there.
And this is another thing that the lady mentions in the intro, is if you were to die, a new hope would arise. So even if you failed and you died, they would just send another hero to do the same thing that you're doing.
They're trying to set up a cyclical nature to justify the New Game Plus, because Dark Souls did, other games did.
Right.
And I feel like that's all fine and dandy, but only if it works. But then you can't just have like this throwaway line in the beginning about an ancient hero who went generations ago and killed a dragon.
Because monsters have been hunting humanity for years.
Okay, and
generations.
So then you're washed aboard an island, and it seems to be within stone's throw of the tower, of the Dark Tower of the Stephen King Dark Souls.
Right.
Alright, so it seems like your character could just surpass the entire game if right there they just said, I'm going to set up camp, wait till morning, and once this storm's chilled out, I'm going to swim over there.
Right.
And then you fight the end boss, and that's your speedrun mode. Maybe that's an option.
But no!
Here's the thing, because you do eventually end up on that island that you see in the opening cutscene. That's right across... Like just a small body of water, like a passage of water.
You do end up over there, but the very important thing to point out is how you end up there from where you are. Okay, so you wake up.
So instead of just swimming across the ocean, you push on and you run across a survivor who's getting attacked by the main protagonist in the game, or antagonist, enemy type in the game because they are on Earth, which makes them more important to our character, who is human and an Earthling, is the Root. And all you know of them is that they are this being that appears to be a hive mind thing that is taking over the planet and wiping humanity out. You help fight off some of them and try to save this survivor. A door opens, you're let inside, and where you end up is a lab.
Ward 13.
Yes, and you through exploration and other things. So initially you're just told by the person in charge, the woman in charge, is it Ford?
It's Ford, yeah.
And I forget her first name, but she says that she was the initial guy who set up the sanctuary's granddaughter, correct? Or great-granddaughter?
Yes, great-granddaughter. It might be granddaughter or great-granddaughter.
Either way,
regardless.
It's generations removed from when the first time the Root showed up, because they say they've hunted us for generations. So it could be a granddaughter, it could be a great-granddaughter. Generational. Anyway, so through exploration of this place, you come to find out that this is a lab from the 1960s that was involved in experiments involving people who were either psychic, and this is where it starts to get fuzzy because I just read all these notes, is they're found in a very Fallout 4 fashion, where it's an old computer that still has power to it that you're able to turn on and read, a passive
computer notes,
journal notes. Yes, from the old world. And it's all based in the 1960s. And they had these people that they had hooked up to machines, and they were giving drugs, and they were able to enter other worlds. And these other worlds had guardians, and these dreamers would attach themselves to the world's guardian in order to better just basically survey the world. And the plan, from what I understand, was eventually to travel to these worlds and develop them. Right? Because that's like, the human way.
Exploration.
Yeah. Well, through finding out about these notes, you're told before you find out any more of the story beyond just that's the general gist.
That's like what's been
what
happening.
You can find without
this
further
is why
items.
There's like other worlds, other dimensions, alternate realities.
Ward 13 later becomes the stage to actually enter the final area of the game. So a lot of information that you're finding here is through exploration prior to that moment.
Right.
And you find some really good goodies early on, like hills and, tomes of knowledge, which is basically a free level up point.
Right.
There's a lot of really cool stuff to be found down there. In addition to the submachine gun, there's a hidden gun that Nito showed us that was hidden down there that we hadn't found. Very cleverly hidden, I might add. That was a clever little hidden area.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, I would have never thought to take those steps in order to find that
super specific order.
Yeah. It was a clever puzzle, environmental puzzle that a smart player would recognize. Like, Nito had figured that out by himself. And he was just like, you want me to show you? I was like, yeah, fuck yeah. Show me. I'm down for the submachine gun. I want a submachine gun.
Yeah.
And so, seeing that, I was like, wow, that's clever. And I probably wouldn't have found it unless I had been, because I think Nito played a lot of it solo. So he was doing a lot of, exploration and things without, where he wasn't playing with friends and jumping back and forth between games and all those things.
Yeah.
He was doing a more in-depth playthrough of just his world. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that was interesting to see that. But you were told from, what is her name? It's Ford? Is it Warden Ford? Or did they call her Warden?
They call her Ford. I can't remember her first name, but her last name is Ford. She is a distant relative of Commander Ford.
You tell her that you need to get to the tower that's just across the little bit of body of water outside.
Yeah.
That you can't just go to and swim across. Now, I understand there's enemies out there, but considering what you have to go through to take the portal to the fucking island at the end of the game, it'd probably be fucking easier to just swim across the fucking small passage of water.
And safer.
But she tells you that the only way you're going to be able to activate these machines and figure out what's going on is if you find her grandfather and follow his footsteps.
And this crystal activates at the beginning, and she
Yeah.
says, use this to follow his path.
Yeah, and that's the gist. You find some notes of his. It talks about the initial onset of the root and then falling to it, and him trying to do experiments to figure out how to stop it at the sacrifice of personal relationships with his wife and his daughter. So like you read these things, and it's
And then it just kind of drops all that by the second planet.
You're just like, it doesn't matter anymore. And on the second planet, you're introduced to like this female. She appears to be a slave of some sort because they have her.
At the very introduction when you walk
and
through
she's
the portal.
one, and she's probably leading you to the Undying King because they mention a race of people, and you don't see many that look like her.
Right.
Like she appears to be more humanoid in nature,
like
and
earthly.
she speaks English.
Right.
But she says that's her other language. Like they made a big deal out of the dialogue with that.
Like it's slave
But
language.
she's once you and the thing about the first planet, which is Earth, is like it leads you to the root mother, right? And then who is she and why is she important?
She says, well, I know that Commander Ford went through the labyrinth, so you need to get to the labyrinth.
And it's hinted at that she's a dreamer, but she's like connected to the root, and somehow she's able to break the connection with the root whenever, but she only does it when you show up. Because why? Like you're important? I don't know. You must be.
Why is she not evil if she's corrupted by the root? She's connected to the root, and the root's evil and trying to consume everything. So why isn't she trying to consume everything?
I don't know, dude. And so like that's the thing. After that, you end up in this tower that drops from like I say about the world building and presentation and visuals. They are fucking awesome. There's a lot of really cool things, like Stargate vibes mixed with like you were saying, Dark Tower feeling with the wastelands and things like that, and the visual representation of the whole point of the game being you have to get to the island with the Dark Tower on it initially.
Go to the tower.
Right? Because then you get there and you have to restart the game, right? Roland, go back to stage one.
Go back to where you came from.
You initiated New Game Plus.
Go back to the beginning of the game now. But another thing to point out that I want to pull up real quick at this point, because you brought up New Game Plus a couple times. New Game Plus does not work how it works in Dark Souls. So you beat the game. In regular game, you have the option, or in Dark Souls 1, for example, it just goes straight to the beginning of the game, re-rolls it in New Game Plus. Now it's like randomized items. Some items are differently placed. Some of them are same. But overall, the game is harder. You're going to get more souls because it accounts of the previous playthrough that you just did. Which we found out that the New
There's
Game
no
Plus...
items change in Dark Souls.
No?
Fuck no.
Well, regardless,
Maybe
the
in Dark
difficulty...
Souls 3.
Well, regardless, the difficulty
Dark
does
Souls
scale.
2, but not Dark Souls.
The most important thing to talk about, though, is that the difficulty does scale to account for the previously completed playthrough. Now, in Remnant Rise from the Ashes, there is no New Game Plus mechanic that does account for the previous completed playthrough.
It's just you reset campaign and start over, right?
And it's on either normal, hard, or nightmare. And so even if we were to wipe the progress and go back on hard, it would be essentially the exact same experience, but nerfed because we got all of our progression. Yeah.
But there is the replayability where you could knock it up a difficulty notch, and you could aim for different bosses on each playthrough.
Right.
So like anyway, the story-wise,
right,
you end up on the desert planet, and she tells you to seek the Undying King because the Undying King is who knows where Ford is. You go through that area, you hit him, and during the course of that, there's an NPC there's a couple of NPCs that can be found in each different world. There's usually one that does some dialogue dump, and then there's special vendors that sell like special shit.
Buffs.
There's the bug lady who sells you the
armor.
The armor one that increases your armor benefits from your gear. There's the health and Mudtooth soup. Mm-hmm. His one that gives you boosted stamina, boosted health.
Soup and tonic, yeah.
And then there's NPCs. So there's a couple on the desert planet that you can run to, and through talking to them, they'll give you a little bit about the world and the state of the world. But the overall story arc of your character and your motivations are find Ford.
You will get me to the tower.
Because you got to get to the tower. Because you're humanity's hope. Because once upon a time, generations ago, someone killed a dragon.
On the Tower Island.
And you're going there because you're going to kill the dragon. You don't know why you're the one who's going to kill the dragon.
Is there even a dragon that you're going to kill? I don't even know. But regardless, you're going there to kill something because you've been hunted for generations.
And you don't know why you're going. Like, who sent you? Like you said humanity sent you. But I didn't...
Your humanity's hope.
Did that infer that? Like, yeah, did it tell you that?
It states that you are one of humanity's last hope, and what happens when the hope dies another hope will...
So, but that's the thing. Like, who the fuck am I to be humanity's hope?
Yeah.
Like, why is that where I ended up? How come I'm not, and like, that was another thing with the NPCs in the hub, like Ward 16, like, I didn't feel like they were very well fleshed out characters. I felt like one was there to sell me shit. This one's there to sell me some other shit, and this one's there to give me boss weapons.
Yeah.
Boss mods. I didn't feel like they had any character other than the one who gave me boss mods was kind of a bitch for no fucking reason, and I never really got a reason why she was such a bitch to me.
And Ford, the woman who runs the place, after you beat that intro and you start branching out into other places, there's really no
She's
point.
Like not even
You don't
involved.
even have to talk to her. She's not involved in
it's
any
just
aspect.
Ward 13 is where you go because that guy sells you some shit, that guy sells you some other shit, and that chick sells you boss weapons.
And this guy upgrades
upgrades your shit. Yeah, like that's why you're going there.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like even in Dark Souls 3 where that's pretty much the gist of your hub of Firelink Shrine is to be that place for your NPCs who will sell you shit, train you shit, do whatever shit. It's like there's still things there, interesting things like Grey Rat. You can send him out, and then he can eventually die. And there's a quest line that exists outside of the shrine. It doesn't feel like he's just there to sell you shit. You know what I mean? But that felt like that was the entirety point. And there were NPCs that were just there, and it felt like they were there to dump exposition on you. Like, we've been hiding out here for several hundred years. This is the only safe place that we've ever been able to find. And it was like, I didn't feel like in that aspect, like World 13, where the game shone through brightest in the world building aspect was purely through a visual standpoint. Like when you see that the desert, the Undying King's world, and it's all just blasted buildings that are fucking hollowed out, desolate, dusty wasteland with these crazy like tribal dudes wearing animal skulls over their heads throwing fucking spears. You're like, whoa, what the fuck happened on this planet, dude?
Yeah.
And then you see that architecture, like the Undying King's fucking obelisk looking where he is, And it's like so alien and foreign.
And it's like a legit dark tower is on the planet and the very tip is almost eroded away.
It's like fucking, like you can see the wear of it still, but it's so alien compared to like all these other buildings.
Yeah, like skyscrapers and stuff.
And so
like
it's
that,
like, and the lady who initially greets you on this planet speaks your language, and she seems to have a menacing air about her. And I feel like her whole deal is she's sending you to the Undying King under his orders. That's the vibe I got from her.
Right, yeah.
And I got the vibe, that's where I pull like that religious influence of like, I feel like he put himself up as a god. Like, I'm Undying King. Like, I'm immortal. I'm a god. Worship me. And the people seem to be primitive to the point where they would accept that.
Right.
Like the tribesmen and shit, like where they would accept that and hunt for this guy and kidnap people for this guy to then steal their youth and inject it back into himself.
Right.
And like, that's where the world building to me.
Oh yeah.
That's where it really that's where it hit home, was in the visuals and that shit.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like on Earth, I didn't never really feel like that on Earth. It just felt like that was very
There was one
basic.
moment on Earth leading up to the desert, which was a really cool moment that I want to insert here real quick before we move on from the desert to the next planet. But the labyrinth and the person that you talked to, the guardian of the labyrinth,
he was in the tower. That was after you reach the root mother and she tells you that Ward went to the labyrinth. You reach the labyrinth by walking after you had done the root mother encounter and saved her and separated her from the root. You continue onward, and a tower falls out of the sky, and you go into it, and he sends you to the labyrinth, which is basically, I mean, how often are you even there, and what's there? It's basically a hub network, and he explains it to you.
Yeah, he explains it to you.
It's like the undercurrent of all worlds.
It's the foundation of which all worlds are built upon.
So it's basically a doorway to all worlds.
Pretty much. And he also explains that Earth, or the root, are corrupting guardians and consuming these worlds, and that all worlds have guardians to help protect them from outside threats such as the root, except for Earth, because he uses the term inviolable, which is a crazy word. I didn't even know what it meant until I had to Google it, and it turns out incorruptible. So another cool aspect about that is it's almost like Earth does have a huge importance in the story and the world building, because it doesn't have that guardian figure to like ward off this evil entity. And that's why the evil entity is able to eventually break through from all of these worlds because of what humans have been doing. Like, there is some cool to the story, but
what's the point of that even matter when after you talk to that guy, he sends you to the labyrinth, and the labyrinth is essentially 3 doors to the zones that you need to go to.
Yeah, which you don't even need to go to. I mean, you're following...
Exactly. The whole point of this is so you can reach the tower. Remember that.
And
super important.
And Ford.
The tower that is just a swim away from where your character begins the fucking adventure when you take control of your character.
And a random character, Ford, which isn't even mentioned within the introductory cutscene.
At all. None of that's mentioned. Unless he's the ancient warrior who went to slay the dragon.
Which we don't know.
We don't know. Anyway, upon finding and confronting the Undying King, you're either given the option to work with him, which he sends you to the next planet, and I can't recall its name either, because they're not really mentioned that much enough that they would be remembered after one playthrough. And so he tells you that you need to go there and kill their guardian and bring him its heart so that he can restore his guardian so that he can protect the root from his planet. But really, I think that he wanted the guardian's heart because it would give him more life.
More power.
Yeah, maybe, and I think he's probably the one who killed their guardian and probably consumed it himself. And opened his world up to being invaded.
Yeah.
Right? So, you can outright confront him and kill him. Okay? Either way, the next planet you end up on is the swamp planet with a insectoid race that's a hive mind that has completely taken over all the colonists, and we don't even know who they are or what they were. You only talk to this queen butterfly looking woman.
And the race is called the Iskal. She's called the Queen of the Iskal.
Yeah, so she's probably the hive mind in charge.
Right.
And her minions are attacking you the whole time, but then she says you can join them, so I wonder if you join them if everything in the swamp world is non-hostile. Right. Because that's the thing. That was what I didn't understand, is they're talking about, like, you meet her and she strikes up a deal. And she says, well, if you give me the heart, then I can... What did she want the heart for? I didn't even know.
I don't even know either. But isn't it interesting that the Guardian's heart is one of her fucking race?
Yeah.
It's bugs.
It's bugs on her planet.
It's big giant bugs on her planet, and you need their heart. Why don't you just go fucking get it? Aren't you hive mind or not? Shut down their fucking brain. Rip out the heart.
And that's the thing. Why did she want the Guardian's heart? We don't know.
Right.
Either way, the third planet culminates in you destroying the Xilius, and you take his heart either to the Undying King or to her, which is what we did, since we couldn't give it to the Undying King because Chris's game file had been corrupted and he lost 38 hours of gameplay.
Yeah.
So that was cool for him.
Yeah.
He was super fucking happy and excited that was able to happen to his save file, let me tell you.
He was as giddy as a pig in shit.
And so either way, all of that really doesn't matter because it's all about just the portal key that the Undying King has, that he opens the portal and sends you through if you work with him. You end up with that portal key, then you go to the last planet, the last zone in the game, which was very cool. It was a like forest planet, which visually I think was the most pleasant contrast to the desert.
Yes.
Like when you see the desert being this hollowed out, kind of industrialized world that had seen a post-apocalyptic like nuclear war or some sort of thing, like a draining of all resources,
a radiation corruption.
Yes, and then you see this planet that's all fertile, all green, gorgeous, giant trees to rival that of the Entmoot. Huge trees, like just gorgeous scenery in this planet, and it's all the goat
Pan's Labyrinth people.
Yeah, it's basically Guillermo del Toro's planet.
Pan, Peter Pan, the goat people.
But either way, these pans that are having an internal civil war, and you stumble across one of them, a female, and she is the leader of a revolution, and she tells you that basically she's leading the revolution because there's like this class system where the immortals control everyone else, and the nobles, and they have put themselves up again as a religious like sect.
God.
Yeah.
But there's specifically this queen that rules them who does get the fruit that makes them immortal.
Yeah.
She mentioned something
but she says the tree is dead and they've been drinking and eating fruit that has been preserved. And eventually they're going to run out of it, and she's lying to them, and she's lying to the people, and she's using everyone, so we want to stop them. And Ford came here, and he fell in love with our people, and we're assuming at this point it must be that Ford got a hold of this. I don't think he ever says that. Does he say that? Does she say that?
Get a hold of what?
Does anyone mention that Ford gets access to this immortal fruit?
No, nobody mentions this.
Because that's the thing. Ford, when you find out that Ford is one of the scientists from the 60s, all of a sudden, none of this fucking makes sense. Unless he has had some sort of sustainment that has given him long life.
Right.
Beyond that, because his granddaughter is old now.
Right.
So, the fuck Ford.
Yeah.
Either way, she tells us that Ford is a prisoner of the Queen and you gotta go break him out. We never confront the Queen. I don't know if she's a variation of a boss that we could have possibly ran into. We didn't see her. We fought some goat shaman. So there were some pretty cool boss fights. None of them reached the difficulty or challenge of that Xilius boss. Yeah, Xilius boss. Nothing came close to that. That boss was the hardest boss. He was harder than the last boss in the game. He was the hardest boss in the game on hard mode, in my opinion, for a first playthrough. He was the hardest boss.
I agree.
And so like that whole last world felt underwhelming. The enemies didn't feel like they challenged us as much as the previous areas had.
Right. There was a lot of really cool visuals, some peaceful moments.
Gorgeous
There's
visuals.
that NPC playing the flute.
Yeah, on the statue of the Pan.
That shit was cool.
There's some really... That's what I'm saying about the world building. It's those moments that's tied to the exploration.
Yeah.
And I wish that they had a better planned narrative to support that. Because
you all of a sudden it all
just
comes
bad.
to a halt as soon as you run into a Ford. This is the comparison that I brought up earlier that I'm gonna compare it to. It reminded me a lot of Kingdom Hearts 3 as far as storytelling goes. I didn't like Kingdom Hearts 3's story. I'm not gonna lie. Okay.
I couldn't even remember at this point than
I thought the gameplay
Disney aspects.
I thought the gameplay was fun. It was very enjoyable for me because I enjoyed the source material of Disney movies, especially Monsters Incorporated,
Toy Story, Big Hero 6.
Some places that we were going to that we hadn't been to before. But the overall story of Kingdom Hearts, I find a convoluted, jumbled mess, and Kingdom Hearts 3 was no different. Now, the reason why I'm
worst part-
comparing it to Kingdom Hearts 3 is because in Kingdom Hearts 3, you're playing a character named Sora. You're not very given a lot at the beginning other than he failed a challenge and he must regain the power of awakening. And off starts this adventure, and you beat the entire game all the way to the last 10% of the campaign before, oh, you didn't need the power of awakening, it was inside you the whole time. And now we're just gonna dump fucking exposition on your head so that you understand what happened the entire time you've been playing. Like, and that's why I felt that way about Remnant.
It was because you play, like, for example, you play, like, through the Pirates of the Caribbean world, and it's like it's mainly about just Pirates of the Caribbean and Sora being back there and doing things.
Yeah.
But there's like one of these Heartless or whatever anime characters that are in the background, and they have a purpose on each planet, and the story that leads to the ending is that it has nothing to do with getting crabs to rebuild the pearl.
Right.
It has nothing to do with, you know, killing enemies and unlocking this or that or the other, or playing through the world. It has nothing to do with Elsa and her beef with her sister or whatever the dumb fuck that movie is about, and the stupid snowman that has a pedophile's voice.
Right.
It's not about that. It's all about that one little fucking 2-minute section of the entire world where the Heartless in the emo goth gear shows up, says a couple of little things about what they were trying to do, and then they leave.
And it's almost isolated, like it doesn't tie together.
So it's a
and
good
that's
comparison.
how I feel about Remnant.
It's a good comparison, but I would say that Kingdom Hearts, in its convolution, has more interesting things and a more cohesive plot than this.
Because
like I said, this entire game takes place because your fucking character can't swim.
Another thing about Kingdom Hearts is it is intended for a younger audience, so they don't want it like... They want kids to understand it. So, like, even though it was convoluted, I understood it. I'm just saying that I didn't enjoy
I know what you mean. You understood it because it was simplified down for a younger audience. So it was spelling itself out.
But I didn't enjoy the style of storytelling that it presented.
I wish this game spelled itself out more. Because from what I can tell, the entirety of this game could be skipped if your character could fucking swim.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because the only reason Ford is a character that's needed is because Ward 13 is where we end up, because we don't swim across the bay.
Yeah.
Right? That's the whole thing, like that small passage between islands.
But he offers exposition as to why the route
but,
and all this other shit.
But the only reason we're looking for him, period.
Right.
The whole point of the game, period,
is
our
to
character's
get to the tower.
entire motivation is to get to the tower, which we find out after going through the Pan world and finding Ford is the location of the secret 1960s government lab where the initial dreamer who encountered the root allowed the root to invade him and become part of him.
Well, Harsgard hooked up a dreamer to the root.
Yeah,
it was
Harsgard.
The specific sentence that he dumps on you or regurgitates onto your fucking body.
He's like, oh, you're looking for the tower? That must mean you're looking for Harsgard.
You're
Who's
looking
Harsgard?
for this character.
He's the madman who hooked up the dreamer to the root. And he let in the root, and we tried to stop it, but it must have been Harsgard.
It's Harsgard.
I couldn't figure out how to stop it.
You've never heard of it? You're not from the 60s?
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, dude. So, like, he tells you that you can use the machine at Ward 13 to teleport to the other island because your character can't swim. You teleport to the other island and you encounter the dreamer. He turns into a big moth boss that is incredibly
You go
buggy.
inside his mind, too. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about the boss fight is it's bugged the fuck. First of all, he's supposed to pull a random person. Nito likened it to a Destiny boss, and I think it's incredibly fitting. It reminds me of the Vault of Glass, the final encounter with Atheon, I do believe. It was anyway, I don't remember who it was, but it was the one where you had to enter the portal with half of your 6-man fire team, and take out certain parameters within that, and then you come back out of it, and it makes the boss able to be attacked.
Right.
Essentially. That's exactly what this boss does. However, it was only taking me, it wasn't my game. We were playing in your game at this point when we beat this game.
And not only that, but me and Nito were seeing the animation, because when it takes you, it like kind of flickers your character in and out of existence, and you get this weird red mist swirling around your body. We were seeing that animation, like the game was going to take one of me or him. And then we would look at the party outside, and it's, oh, Jax is in there.
Yep, it was pulling me in every time.
Yeah.
Then, on the first attempt, my mod powers bugged out, so I could not cast them anymore, and it was still intent on taking me and only me. I found myself, like, unable to, essentially within this portal that he takes you into, you have to kill a certain amount of enemies, and each enemy will give you one stack towards a buff that will allow you to break the boss's shield so that all three of you in your party can do damage to the boss.
Right.
It's a very cool idea for a boss, and I really wish it had worked out, because for my first experience on this boss, he bugged out my mod power. He only took me, and I don't know if that was related to the mod power being bugged out, but I just let them kill me. I said, I'm not gonna do this, guys. I'm sorry. I can't use mod power. It's taking me in there. I want to reset. I'm just gonna die. If you guys can kill him, kill him. But you guys just said, fuck it, no, like, Jax, don't worry about it. We'll fucking kill ourselves too.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, even if you were experiencing that bug, like, I would want to die.
Yeah.
If you're having a bug that you can't use your abilities and your entire build is basically worthless now because of a bug, and me dying and us resetting the boss
can fix it,
like, consider it done.
Yeah.
So you and Nito immediately fucking threw yourselves down. We reloaded, and it immediately just kept pulling me in there. Mm-hmm. And this time it didn't bug out, and I was able to use my mod powers until we killed him. But the whole time I was just thinking, like, man, this boss would be pretty cool if it wasn't bugged out and only pulling me in there. If it hadn't bugged out the first time and not allowed me to use my mod powers, which is what my entire character's progression and build has been building towards the whole time. And if it had some context behind its presentation, beyond just this, oh, Harsgard plugged the fucking Dreamer into the root.
And then you walk into the portal and you go to this ward where this Dreamer's hooked into the root, and you find this crystal which you have been using to teleport to these other worlds, and this Dreamer has it completely connected and entangled with the root. So you understand, okay, that's how the roots go into these planets and consume them.
Yeah, because it's tied into this technology.
Yeah, humanity built some shit that they weren't really prepared to deal with, kind of like Stranger Things.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
They came into contact with something that is not essentially a good entity. It has that
Lovecraftian inspiration behind it as well.
Right.
But the whole thing about it is the open, let's, for instance, since this is comparing, it's a Dark Souls like game, right? It wants that. It has a stamina bar, it has a dodge, it has very steady, like, I would say, what's the word, fucking deliberate combat, where you have to, like, ammo counts. You can't just be throwing bullets at enemies. Like, ammo counts. There is an ebb and flow to battle. There is resource management in the form of mod powers and healing. You know, you have your healing system, much like Estus, which you gain more of over time. So this is the thing where I feel like if it wants that title and it wants to incorporate those systems, as well as the shortcut systems, the world systems, things like that, with the Nautabons. Right. You know, let's all sit around the Nautabon. It's definitely not a bonfire.
Crystal bonfire,
yeah,
which
you know
people
what I mean?
Online have been calling them. Crystal bonfires.
They're Nautabons.
They're not bonfires.
Just so you know, that's what they're called. Like,
Nautabons.
if you're curious about what those, they're Nautabons.
Yeah.
They're Nautabons. Not Audubon, Nautabon. It is not a bond. Definitely not a bond.
Not a bond.
Let's all sit down and rest around the Nautabon. But so I feel like with that in mind, let's take the last boss of Dark Souls 1, Gwyn. He's mentioned in the opening cutscene. He's integral to the world building of this that he built. Right? Like, this is his creation.
He's not just mentioned. Seath,
yes,
Nito, Isolate.
Okay? And that's the thing. When you come up against these bosses, there's context behind them, because not only is it in the opening cutscene, you know, Kath mentions him, or Framped, I mean, rather, Guinevere mentions him. For a first-time player, like, Gwyn's going to be, you're going to know much about Gwyn.
Right.
Especially if you're playing it with the intention of soaking up everything you can and getting as much out of it as possible. You're going to end up fighting Gwyn and knowing a lot about Gwyn, about who he is, what his role was in the overall world, and the position you find him in is going to have context and meaning behind it. Even if you're someone who's steamrolling the game and you only watch the opening cutscene, you still have more context for who that boss is than this boss that we're given. This boss is a human with a Dr. Octopus. Well, at first he's like...
human kid?
Before,
like a little kid.
Before his second phase, where he turns into that big moth thing. And is that the dragon? I don't know. But before that, he's basically Dr. Octopus.
Yeah.
Like, he has those tentacle things, and he walks towards you using them, and he spins them and tries to hit you with them. He's Doc Ock. Then you knock him out of that, and then all of a sudden he's this giant, like, psychic moth, because he's pulled you in, and he's, like, fighting you with his mind, but he's also the root. So he's summoning the root in, like, this alternate dimension. So as you in an alternate dimension, then you're taken into an even more alternate dimension. Like, that's the thing, is, like, the context behind this boss. Like, we finished this game, and I had no desire to finish it on my playthrough.
Right.
I was like, fuck it. I think we got enough to review the motherfucker. Like,
yeah.
Because the thing about
it doesn't make any sense.
With all of those replayability points that we were bringing forth earlier in the review about randomized items, randomized bosses, all of these things, yes, good, yes, good, yes, good. But the second we finish this game and we see this exposition dump from Ward, and we see the whole point of this entire voyage, the reason Ford's granddaughter is important, the reason Ward 13 is important, the reason this machinery is important, all of it. All of it. The only reason it's important is because we couldn't swim a small passage, because either way we're ending up there, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, could it possibly be locked on the surface? I don't know. Our character never tries. Maybe that would have been a better choice. Like, oh, this place that we need to get into, this tower, is locked up tight and we can't get in there. Let's explore the surrounding area. And then you come across these survivors. And then you find out about Commander Ford and the plot in the 60s involving Guardians and Sleepers and Dreamers and different worlds and teleportation and all this shit.
But it doesn't matter, because nothing in the introduction cutscene sets up anything that happens.
The introduction cutscene is pointless as shit.
It sets up no world events.
Is fucking pointless.
What world events happen? A dragon dies, a hero dies, there's a tower, go find it.
And a dragon, and then you're on a boat, and now it doesn't do anything.
It doesn't.
It does nothing. Like, it would have been better for this game, frankly, to open up with just a... You have fucking fled your fucking home place, and you are the only one who got away, and your entire family and everyone you know was wiped out by this enemy, and you are bound for revenge, and you want to find out who, what, why, when, where. With this in mind, you heard rumors of blah blah blah, a tower in the north, and you fucking wandered and you found the tower and it was locked up, and upon further investigation you found a nearby, settlement of survivors, and then bam, here you go. Yeah. And even then it still doesn't work, because you go through all this to find Ford. And
then the last 10% after the exposition dump is killing a boss you had no
idea about until just barely.
Until that exposition dump.
Yep.
And then you beat the boss, and it all culminates in you, I found my boat that I was in the beginning.
Yeah.
Time to go back to human civilization.
The boat probably just floated across the bay.
Like you could have swam.
Because the game started with the boat, and so it had to end with your character
And it's rolling
sailing
in the
off
Dark
boat.
Tower, yeah.
But then it rolls to credits, and they don't even have a song playing the credits.
Yeah, that was weird
Do
too.
you not want me to fucking sit through?
Do you not
like,
have?
Are you not proud of this game?
Have you not paid
Like,
for
here's the
somebody to
thing.
make a unique song?
This is the funniest part, is when I brought that up, Nito was like, it could be worse, Jax. It could be the fucking ending credits song from Borderlands 3.
And it's a good point.
I appreciate the ability to skip your end credits because of that reason. Because like in the case of Borderlands 3, like, fuck
Music is subjective.
that
and
audio
people
garbage.
are
No,
not
there's
gonna
no
like...
subjective anything about it. Those lyrics are fake as fuck. They're there meant to make you feel something about Lilith, which the goddamn fucking cutscene of the ending summed up good enough. And that song could have had a more Borderlands feel to it, but for whatever fucking reason, they went with some trashy bullshit fucking female power propaganda crap.
Overproduced pop.
It's crap.
Overproduced
Crap with the most basic bitch lyrics ever written. She's just a girl, but she's on fire.
Because she's
What?
named Firehawk.
Because she's the Firehawk.
You
Get it?
fucking
She
genius!
knows. It's almost as bad as when Ava is like spelling it out to you. Like,
Yeah.
she knows. She's gonna sacrifice herself. She's the Firehawk.
She's the hero
She's
that
the hero Pandora needs.
deserves.
No, she's the hero Pandora needs, not the hero Pandora deserves.
Yeah.
But she's the Firehawk, and she's just a girl, but she's on fire. No, subjective bullshit. No, objectively bad song that no one will fucking ever remember. So thank you for giving me, and they knew.
Oh, yeah.
They were self-aware enough.
Oh,
They were
yeah.
like, let them have the ability to skip it. And that's the thing that's sad, is when you consider the end credit song to Borderlands 2, Borderlands 1, it's like, where did this come from, and who did you let make decisions that day? Because they probably didn't need to be making them.
Yeah.
But either way, like, I will sit through your credits. I appreciate the option to skip them, because God knows, like Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, sit through these credits twice if you want the achievement for beating the game. Motherfuckers.
Like 20 minutes. Go
And
take
so,
a shit.
yeah,
it's
yeah,
gonna be a
yeah.
while.
Oh, for days. So I appreciate the ability to skip your cutscene, but at least have a song there.
Yeah.
And that was the thing, is there were a lot of really good tracks in the game that I felt were very good, like ambient setting music that felt interesting and different based on the worlds, you know, and the boss songs were all pretty solid. It wasn't anything like I wouldn't say that it's like anything standout.
Right.
And I wouldn't say it's just serviceable. I'd say it's better than that. But there's nothing during the end credits to this game.
Nothing.
So the whole ending with, like, you're back on your boat and you're sailing away, and it's like, well, good thing you only have to fucking say, like, why not just use the crystals? Are the crystals no longer valid now that you've killed the Dreamer? Who fucking knows? That's the thing.
Maybe
Who
the crystals are just a way to
knows?
teleport to other dimensions, because it is based
the-
off the Dark Tower, and the Dark Tower is a jumbled mess of walking through alternate dimensions, which there's like 30 different Earths, one of which is Wizard of Oz. So,
But here's the thing, if you can teleport to other worlds through the crystals that are found on the other worlds, why in the fuck is the labyrinth even necessary?
Exactly.
Why is there the guy who tells you about the labyrinth and what its position is?
Yeah.
When all it is basically a middle hub.
a middle hub.
It's like, it doesn't, that's the thing about it, is like visually everything, it's like Destiny at the end of the day, where, and at least in Destiny there's a little bit more context behind it
Right.
than even this, because in this we truly don't know what happened to the Undying King's world. We're just inferring upon the visuals given to us.
Yeah.
And that, like I said, that's where this game is the strongest, in the exploration and the visual way that these areas are so vastly different. Like, just vastly different.
Mm-hmm.
And they all look really good. You can tell the art team gave a shit. The enemies, the combat's fun. I feel like it's completely fair. I feel like it's smooth. I never felt like if I got hit by something, it wasn't my fault.
Right.
I felt like I, at any given point, had
It was
the ability.
difficult but fair.
Yes, I had the ability to avoid what was happening, and I had the tools that I needed to handle the situation.
Yeah.
And I felt like that got easier the farther you got through the game, and the more bosses you killed and rewards you got in that aspect of the progression, as well as the trait points, which adds more health, more stamina, more damage on critical hits, more damage on weak point damage, because not only is there weak point damage, which is like a headshot, but on top of that, that weak point damage could also crit, and regular damage also had the chance to crit. So there were all sorts of things there found in the trait trees to progress that way, and I enjoyed a lot of it. And at the end of the day, like I'm running out of things to say, but I would say, just based on my playthrough of the 40 hours or however long it took us to play it in 3 people's games, if you're buying this to play with friends, I would suggest it. If you're buying it to play it by yourself, put it on normal and get it on a deep sell.
I would 100% agree with that.
Because if it took us a little over 40 hours to beat it in 3 games up until the 3rd planet when Crumb's game went bust and he lost all his progress, and then after that to finish it in your game because all we did was after that point, once Chris was gone, I was like, let's just get in your game, let's fucking try to beat this world. Let's just push it, because there's another world we haven't seen yet. I want to see it. Let's just fucking... And I want to review the game, because there's a lot of things I really like about the game. In my opinion, one of the better Souls-likes that I've played.
Right.
One of the ones that integrated things in a very unique and cool way and has its own flavor and twist to it. You know, despite the Nautobonds, despite all that, the Dragon Heart Estus flasks, regardless, all that shit aside, I felt like it had an interesting twist. I liked the Dark Tower aspect of it.
I did too.
I dug the multiple worlds, Lovecraftian vibe, these ancient beings that are trying to break through and take over whole planets, and like they view it as a service to the people, and like a lot of things I really dug. Presentation of the story and motivations behind the main character is all garbage and crap.
Yep. Presentation and the storytelling in which they decide to deliver to the audience the events of history that have taken place in this world.
The game's intro does nothing to service the middle or the end.
It doesn't build it up.
The game's end does nothing to service the middle or the beginning.
At all.
It's basically 1960s, we did some shit, this guy got possessed, and now you are introduced to all these side people and different rulers of these different worlds and different races and different things.
Don't forget Harsgard.
None of it fucking matters.
Don't forget the guy named Harsgard.
The Undying King, none of that shit mattered. The Queen of the Skull, none of that shit mattered. The immortal queen of the goat people, the Pan, none of that shit mattered at the end of the day. Yeah. None of it mattered. It was just you had to get to the island that you could have swam to from the beginning of the game.
And you had to get to Ford, and he took a pilgrimage to find out the root of the root, and then he just gave up.
But he didn't even know. Because when you find him, you ask him, I need to get to Dragon's Atoll. Yeah. And that's when he like... Oh, Harsgard must be the root.
That's Ward, whatever.
You're the one who gives him the critical information he needs just by being... Why? Because you're humanity's last hope, dude, and you're going to the tower.
But you're rolling. He's on a journey to stop the root, and then halfway through the journey, he's like, let her fly.
I just at the end of the day, I enjoyed playing it. I'm glad I played it. Yeah. I felt like it was an experience worth having.
It was fun, but overall the story was disjointed.
And if there's a random act of God and your power goes out, you could lose all of your playthrough progress. And for people who could be into the New Game Plus, people who became fanatically involved in this game and enjoyed it a lot and was playing with their friends all the time, can you imagine losing progress after you're in Nightmare or New Game Plus, Nightmare, and it's your 4th playthrough of Nightmare, and you're finally starting to kill all the bosses on Nightmare, and you've been able to, do that, and all of a sudden, oh, fuck,
just gone.
200 hours, bye.
Bye.
Because I don't know if that's on console, but I can't recommend the game.
Yeah.
Based on that alone, that is not something that should ever fucking happen.
Ever.
So I enjoyed it. It was worth the play for me, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Mm-mm.
Like, sincerely, unless it's a deep sell and you go into it with that in mind.
Mm-hmm.
That you could lose all your progress because this company has not fixed that bug.
Yeah.
It's something they're aware of, and they have not fixed.
Yeah.
So, all I'm going to say, though, is that bridge boss, bro, when we were up against that just all night, and then we gave up, we came back to it like a few nights later, we were up against it all night, and we finally just clicked and we got it. And that feeling when we killed that boss, that fucking victory rush, bro.
Felt
Oh my
so
god.
good.
It's the shit.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
not many feelings that are like that. And
At all.
there's not many games that can give you that experience. And I felt on multiple bosses this game delivered a satisfying, challenging experience that felt fair and balanced and felt like I needed to be at the top of my game in order to take on these challenges, and you as my partner also needed to be at the top of your game.
Right.
Because together we could do this if we fucking hold it down, bro. Like,
Yeah.
and there was always that feeling of like when we went to do another run at a boss, one of those challenging, skill check bosses, even when Chris was with us, like it never felt like we were actively feeling discouraged or angry. We were feeling determined and fucking, sure that this time,
we're gonna get
this
it.
time we're gonna pull it together.
We will get it.
And maybe it didn't happen. Maybe it didn't happen. But eventually we pulled it together and we got it.
Yep.
That's how Nito felt about it. And that's why me, Nito, and you, we were talking about Bloodborne and drawing comparisons to the bosses there. It's not in design or thematic elements or like gameplay. It's mainly in that feeling of like, okay, like I just got murdered, but here's why. I missed a dodge. I missed a parry. I didn't stop him or interrupt his attack. For instance, Martyr Logarius.
Right.
Like, there's certain bosses in Bloodborne that I came up against in a wall that once I finally figured out and clicked on multiple playthroughs, it was just like I'd go in and it was a one-shot. I knew exactly how to kill him.
Right.
And it felt good to do it because it was fair.
Yeah.
It was, I needed to learn the fight. I need to get this shit down. And that's super fucking important. Especially in a Souls-like game. Because that, to me, got lost in the series at a certain point. And is a loss from other games that clamp onto the genre. And try to fit themselves into that genre. And try to sell itself to Souls players.
Right.
I feel like that's something that gets lost is, yes, it's hard. Yes, it's brutal and, punishing, but it's fair.
Yes.
It's up to, if the player learns the systems and becomes better at them, it's no longer, as brutal.
It's no longer as challenging.
It's no longer as challenging. It's no longer...
It's just a question of patience and mastery.
Yep. And I felt this game did a pretty good job with that on bosses.
Absolutely agree.
I'm of two minds about it. I feel like on the one hand, I'm like, I can't recommend this game because of what happened to Crumb.
Yeah.
Fucking, that's 38 hours that he spent on a game that he just lost.
Mm-hmm.
Before he was able to finish the experience. Talk about a nut kick.
Yeah.
Talk about a punch to the gut that makes you genuinely not want to restart that game.
At all.
Then there's the ending, which after we finished, I was like, wow.
And understanding where you went with the story
I don't really need to play this again.
Yeah.
But then there's those moments, like with Zilius, with the Shroud, with these hard
it's not
bosses
so much
where
like
clicks.
It's not so much like Dark Souls 1 where after you beat it, you feel like you want to keep going. You want to keep mastering the systems at play. It's more like once you beat it, for me, that's how I felt.
Yeah, that's how
but
I felt too.
I'll probably play it again later.
Because
eventually down the road.
The whole story for me at the end was so just the way that it resolved itself was so weak and so out of sorts with the rest of the game and the parts of it that I did like. Like, I never found out what happens to the Undying King's planet. If we help him or if we kill him, like, is that play into the ending or is that just a split decision? The skull, like, since we helped them, we didn't find anything about what that affected or changed.
And that is why I made the comparison of Kingdom Hearts 3 too.
And then we restarted the game to get the opening cutscene because I hadn't been recording my first little bit of gameplay. I usually like to wait a little bit until I'm through the intro to start recording so I can get more in-depth gameplay. And so re-recording that and watching that, I'm like, it's literally just across the bay.
Yeah.
The whole game happens because your character doesn't want to swim across the bay.
Go over there. Like... To get over there, I have to go through three separate planets and through a mirror.
Not only, you gotta go through...
But I'm gonna end up on my boat anyway!
You gotta go to the foundation from which all worlds are built upon so that you can go through a portal and then sit at a Nautobahn that is supposedly in canon connected to all the other Nautobahns that are created by humans. How do they get the Nautobahns on this planet? Oh, Ford brought them here? Okay, well, if Ford brought them here, then how come I can teleport from here to Ward 13, which is back on Earth, but I don't go through the fucking foundations of worlds and the labyrinth to get to them? It just felt like, oh, they had an idea for the labyrinth. And on a visual design aspect, it's fucking awesome. Like, the stairs appear. It's very reminiscent of Darksiders. When you fast travel in Darksiders, you go through, like, a little section.
Right.
And it's not difficult or challenging or anything. It's just kind of a way to more immerse the player in it, where it's like, yeah, you're fast traveling, but you're going through, like, an interdimensional portal to get there.
Right.
You know, and that was like, so that's what it was. It was basically, like, that's what it was there for, was to be this, like, player place where they gotta go and like stretch out into these other worlds. But the Nautobahns are there, and then the Nautobahns are on the other worlds, and the other worlds allow you to fast travel back into Ward 13, which you know is on Earth. There's a contradictions, and then there's contradictions, and there's contradictions, and there's, you know, empty holes, and then there's just Harsgard. Harsgard must have plugged in a fucking dreamer.
He plugged in a dreamer to the root.
So that's it for me. I don't even know. Fun game. Had some really good moments.
Sideways thumb.
Sideways meh. Meh on the sideways thumb.
Sideways thumb.
Ain't bad. Ain't really that good. Ain't really that bad.
It's not much, but at least it's something.
It's better than Lords of the Fallen, Nito. Nito's like all over the place. He's like, dude, you'll like it. You'll like it. He said that about Vampire, and I fucking loved Vampire. And he said that about this, and I really liked this. But he also said that about Neo, and I fucking hated Neo. And he also said that about Lords of the Fallen and The Surge, and I didn't particularly like either of those games either. So it's like, Nito, you fucking knocked one out of the park this time, guy. It reached me, and I agree. but I do trust Nito. Like, I think that he has a higher tolerance for bullshit than I do.
He also knows our taste.
And he's better, too. He's better at games.
If there's a Dark Souls-like game that is more akin to Lords of the Fallen, you won't like it.
He'll tell you, too. Yeah, he'll tell you.
He'll tell you straight up.
Yeah.
You didn't like that one, you won't like this.
Yeah. He's been telling me to get Sekiro. I'm going to have to pick that up at some point.
Yeah.
Someday. I got so many fucking games to play right now, but we wanted to wrap this one up with a review, cooperative review. We played the whole thing together. Every minute we spent playing it, we were playing it together. If you're playing it with someone, I'd say yeah. But another thing I gotta say is, like, Outward. I feel like Outward does a better job with the story, and it does it in a more low-key way. And it doesn't feel so much that it's impacting the whole of everything so much as it's just like a faction sort of thing. That's the thing. I can't, and Outward has those moments of, like, awe in exploration and environmental exploration and discovery. Like, there's those moments where your jaw drops. You're like, visual vista of just beautifulness.
Right.
And you're able to walk up to it and, like, interact with it. And there was a lot of that shit in this game.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of that shit in this game. So, like, but Outward did it better, and I'm assuming for less money.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is the combat in this, I felt, was way more smoothed out and fair than Outward, because there was a lot of clunk to Outward. So, especially if you were going solo. So,
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it for me.
You got anything else?
Nah, that's it for me.
That's it for me, Jax
Chubbz.
Till next time, stay awesome, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Let us know down below if you did, or if you didn't. Fuck it, whatever. Let us know. Till next time, stay awesome, everybody, and keep kicking fucking ass.